He told me what to put in the cellar, not in a dream, not in a feeling. He sat with me, or whatever sitting means where I was, and he told me exactly what my family would need when the lights don't come back on. I kept that to myself for almost 2 years, and then the power went out in my county for 9 days, and I watched my neighbors eating out of garbage cans and coming to my door with their hands out, and I understood that keeping quiet had a cost I was no longer willing to pay. My name is Carol Ann Dempsey. I am a retired school teacher from Cookeville, Tennessee. I taught second grade for 34 years. I am not a prepper. I am not a prophet. I am not someone who has visions or hears voices or goes looking for spiritual experiences. I am a woman who made coffee on a Tuesday morning in March of 2022 and woke up 3 days later in a hospital bed with my 2 daughters crying on either side of me. And in between those 2 moments, I was somewhere else. And someone told me something, and I am here to tell you. I want to start with who I was on the morning it happened. I think you need to know the kind of person this happened to before you decide what to do with what I am about to tell you. It was a Tuesday, the last Tuesday of March. I had gotten up at the same time I have gotten up for 40 years, 5:50 in the morning, because old habits from teaching do not die when you retire. The coffee maker was on. I had already let the dog out. I had already done the small loop around the yard that I do every morning, checking on the garden, checking on what Ray's root cellar looked like from the outside. That root cellar, I will come back to that. I was standing at the counter. I had the blue mug in my hands, the one with the chip in the handle, the one Ray gave me the Christmas before he died. It has been on my counter every morning for 11 years. I remember the weight of it. I remember the coffee had just finished brewing and I had not yet poured it. I remember my hands were on the counter. That is the last thing I remember from this side. I am 67 years old. I had never had a heart attack. I had never had so much as a warning. My doctor will tell you I had an undiagnosed arrhythmia, an electrical problem in my heart that had been there apparently for years without making a sound. On that Tuesday morning, it finally spoke. My heart went into a rhythm it could not sustain, and then it stopped. My neighbor Linda comes every Tuesday morning. She drives me to the grocery store. She has done this since Ray died because my car was in the shop for 3 weeks once, and she started doing it, and then neither of us ever stopped. She let herself in through the back door at 8:40 in the morning. I was on the kitchen floor. The coffee was still in the pot, not poured. She called 911, and then she got down on the floor beside me, and she held my hand, and she talked to me the entire time they were coming, even though I was not there to hear her. I was transported to Cookeville Regional Medical Center. They worked on me in the ambulance, and they worked on me when I arrived. They got my heart going, but I did not wake up. I stayed in what they called a monitored state for 72 hours, 3 days. My daughter Dana drove up from Nashville that first afternoon. My daughter Beth flew in from Portland the next morning. They sat in that waiting room, and then they sat beside my bed, and they did not know whether I was going to be the person who woke up or the person who did not. On Friday morning, I opened my eyes. The cardiologist, a man named Dr. Hamed, who I now consider one of my dearest acquaintances, even though I have only spoken to him 3 times, told my daughter Dana something I have never forgotten. He told her that the period of time between when my heart stopped and when Linda found me, combined with the oxygen history during that period, was, in his words, inconsistent with the neurological recovery I made. He said it carefully. He is a careful man. But what he meant was, the brain I came back with should not have been possible given the brain that went in. I am not telling you that to make myself sound special. I am telling you that because I need you to understand that something happened to me that the people who know how brains work cannot fully explain. And what happened in those 3 days is the reason I am sitting here talking to you. The moment I realized I was not in my body is not what I expected it to be. There was no tunnel, not first. The first thing I was aware of was my hands. I noticed my hands were not holding anything, and then I noticed they did not hurt. I have had arthritis in both hands for 12 years. Every morning when I pick up that blue mug, there is pain. Low-grade, familiar, the kind you stop noticing because it has always been there. It was gone, completely gone. And when I noticed that, I looked down and I was not on my kitchen floor. I was not anywhere I could describe to you with a word you already know. What I felt in that moment was not fear. It was not confusion exactly. It was more like recognition, like walking into a room you have never been in, but somehow knowing exactly where the light switch is. I want to stop here for a moment, because what I am about to tell you is the reason I did not stay quiet. And I need you to hear it the way I heard it, not as a story, not as a spiritual experience to be evaluated, but as information, specific, actionable, given to me by someone who knew exactly what they were talking about. The first thing I understood, and I use that word understood because it is more accurate than saw or heard, was that I was in the presence of someone who knew me completely. Not the Carol who taught second grade for 34 years. Not the Carol who organized the school emergency drills. Not the Carol who kept herself together after Ray died. All of me. The parts I had managed and the parts I had hidden and the parts I was still arguing with at 67 years old. Every corner of it. Known. And not judged. That is what I need you to hear. Not examined and found acceptable. Not weighed and passed. Simply known. The way you know something you have always known. The way your mother knows your face in a dark room before you speak. I knew who I was with. I cannot tell you I saw him the way you see a person across a table. It was not like that. It was more like being inside warmth that had intention, warmth that could speak, and when it spoke, I knew. He said my name once, Carol, that is all, just my name. And in that one word, I understood that everything I had ever worried about in my entire life was known and held and accounted for, and that the worrying had never been necessary, and that it was all right that I had done it anyway. But then he spoke about something else, not about what I had carried, about what I needed to carry back. And this is the part that brought me back here to tell you. He did not speak to me about heaven. He did not give me a tour of the afterlife. What he spoke to me about was here. He spoke to me about your Tuesday morning and mine, and what that Tuesday morning is going to look like for a lot of people in this country when something that is already building finally arrives. He told me about the dark. Not darkness in a metaphorical sense. I need to be clear about that. He was not talking about spiritual darkness or moral darkness or the darkness of the human heart. He was talking about the kind of dark that happens when the power goes out and does not come back on, when the lights in your house go dark, when the refrigerator stops humming, when your phone dies and the charging cord in the kitchen wall does nothing. He showed me what that looks like. And what he showed me was not a storm. It was not a regional outage from a downed line. What he showed me had a different quality to it. It had the quality of something that does not self-correct. The quality of something that once it begins, moves. I was standing, and I know that is the wrong word, but I need to use words we both have. I was standing at a vantage point I cannot describe geographically, but I understood that I was looking at a large portion of this country, and the lights began to go out. Not all at once, in sections, from the northeast first, then spreading. And what I understood in that moment, not thought, not calculated, simply understood, was that the people in those dark areas were divided into two kinds: the people who had prepared and the people who had not. And the difference between them was not money. It was not intelligence. It was whether someone had told them in time and whether they had believed it. He showed me what it looks like on the third day without power. Not the first day, when people are still treating it like a camping trip. The third day, when the food in the refrigerator has gone bad, when the tap water is no longer safe because the pumping station has lost power, when the house is cold in a way a sweater does not fix, when you realize your car will not start because the ignition system is tied to a grid that is not running. He showed me neighborhoods that had prepared and neighborhoods that had not. The difference was quiet. It was the difference between a Tuesday morning that is difficult and a Tuesday morning that is dangerous. The prepared neighborhoods had light. They had warm food. They had water. They had people coming and going from house to house, bringing things. The unprepared neighborhoods had people standing in their driveways, looking at each other, and the expression on their faces was, "I did not think it would actually happen." Now let me tell you what he told me to do. I expected something large. I expected fire and judgment and the end of all things. That is not what he gave me. What he gave me was a list, a practical, specific, organized list. The calmness of someone who knows exactly what the situation requires and trusts you are capable of handling it if you are given the information. The first thing he told me about was water. Not stored water only, a way to keep water, a system. He was specific that a few cases of plastic bottles is not what he meant. He meant understanding how your water comes to you and what happens to that system when the power stops. Most water systems in this country depend on electric pumps. The water that comes out of your tap right now is moving because of electricity. When the electricity stops, the pumps stop. The pressure in the lines drops, and what comes out of your tap is no longer safe, if anything comes out at all. He showed me people who had filtration systems and collection barrels and who were, on day 3, still drinking clean water. That difference, that specific difference, is what he wanted me to bring back. The second thing he told me about was food. Not emergency rations, not survival food, real food. The food you actually eat, stored deep. He told me not to store a week's worth. He told me to store the way my grandmother stored, because my grandmother had lived through a time when the store might not have what you needed, and she had organized her pantry accordingly. Canned goods your family will actually eat, dry goods, protein. He mentioned, and I remember this clearly, that the people who stored food they did not normally eat found themselves in a crisis, unable to eat it, because the stress of the situation, plus the unfamiliarity of the food, became too much. Store what you know. Store deep. The third thing he showed me was warmth. And this is the image that has stayed with me most. He showed me people cold in their homes. Not cold the way you are cold when the thermostat is set too low. Cold the way your house gets cold when there is no heat source and the outside temperature is in the 30s, and you have been cold for 2 days already, and your body has stopped being able to warm itself the way it normally does. He showed me elderly people. He showed me children. He showed me people who had food and water, but who were losing the ability to stay warm. And he told me, warmth that does not depend on the grid. That is what the phrase meant. A wood stove, a propane heater with fuel stored safely, a fireplace that is actually functional and not just decorative. Some form of heat that does not require the lights to be on. The fourth thing he mentioned so plainly that I almost laughed, even in whatever state I was in. Light. He talked about light the way you would remind someone to bring their phone charger, gently, almost with a smile, because it seems obvious and yet it is the thing people forget. Candles, lanterns, batteries, the kind that last. He told me that in the first night of an extended outage, the thing people feel most acutely, even before they feel the cold, is the dark. The psychological weight of dark that does not lift. And he told me that light, simple, physical, battery-powered or candle-powered light, does something for people in that situation that cannot be replaced by anything else. But the fifth thing is the one I have thought about the most, because it was the one I least expected. He told me to know my neighbors, not as a sentiment, not as a general be kind to others instruction, as a specific, practical preparation. He told me that the neighborhoods that fared best were not the ones where each family had the most supplies. They were the ones where people already knew each other well enough to share without suspicion, where people knew who had medical training, who had a generator, who had an elderly parent who would need help. The difference was not in what was stored in any individual house. The difference was in whether people trusted each other enough to knock on a door. I have lived on my street for 38 years. I knew my neighbors' names. But after I came back, I realized I did not know them the way he was describing. So I started finding out, not dramatically, just talking, just being the neighbor who shows up with something from the garden and stays for a conversation. Because he told me that knowing is a form of preparation, that the relationship is part of the supply. I watched this play out in the 9-day outage in January of 2024. I had water, I had food, I had warmth, I had light. And because I knew my neighbors, I knew who needed what. Which family had a baby who needed formula? Which elderly man 3 doors down was diabetic? Which family had a generator but not enough fuel? I could be useful in a way that a person with a full cellar but no relationships cannot be. He did not show me heroics. He showed me a woman bringing warm soup to the house next door. A neighborhood that had decided, quietly and in advance, that each person's need was the community's concern. Not a bunker full of supplies, a street full of people who know each other. I need to tell you something about coming back, because I have heard people describe near-death experiences as if returning is the obvious happy ending. You survived, thank God, back to your life. And I want to be honest with you about the fact that it was not like that for me. Where I was at rest, completely at rest in a way I had not been in 38 years of marriage and children and teaching and grieving Ray and worrying. The striving was over, not because I had given up, because I had arrived somewhere that the striving was simply not the point. The point was just to be there, and being there was enough, and Ray was there. I want to say that plainly because I know some of you are here because you have lost someone. Ray was there, not the way I knew him at the end when he was sick and in pain, the way I knew him when we were young. And I understood that nothing that had happened between his death and my death had changed anything about what we were to each other. I say this not to make you wish for death. I say it because you should know that what you are most afraid of losing is not lost. I did not wake up in the hospital grateful. I woke up heartbroken. Dana was there. She was crying. Beth was holding my hand. I was glad to see them. And underneath the gladness was something I have learned to live alongside rather than fight: the grief of leaving. I had been somewhere completely real in a way this world is not completely real, and I had been asked to come back. I knew why. There was work, the list he gave me, the street I live on, the conversation I am having with you right now. The cost of saying this out loud is real. Some people will say I lost oxygen to my brain and that what I experienced was a hallucination with religious imagery. I have thought about every version of that argument for 3 years, and I know what I know. I know the difference between a dream and a truth. I know that when I came home and opened Ray's root cellar and started filling it according to what he told me, I was not acting on a dream. I was acting on instructions. The 9-day outage in January of 2024 settled it for me. I was ready. My neighbors were not. I gave away water and food and 2 propane heaters. I sat with an elderly man named Gerald who lives 4 houses down. His house had gotten cold enough that his hands were shaking, and I brought him over and fed him a warm meal, and I thought, this is why I came back, this man's cold hands. This meal I could give because I was told to be ready to give it. That is when I decided to stop being quiet. Here is what I believe, not what I hope. Not what I want to be true. What I know because I was there and it was told to me. Something is coming, not as a punishment, not as an act of judgment, as a consequence of systems that have been weakening for a long time and that will not hold indefinitely. The power infrastructure of this country is fragile in ways that most people do not think about on a normal Tuesday morning. What is coming will not look like a storm because storms end. What is coming will look like an extended absence, and the people who are ready will be able to take care of themselves and the people around them. The people who are not ready will be the ones standing in their driveways thinking it would not actually happen. He told me what to store. I am telling you. Now you know. Before this week ends, I do not mean someday, I mean before this Friday, I want you to do one thing, just one. Go look at your house the way you would look at it if the power was going out today and was not coming back for 2 weeks. Walk through it with that question. Open your kitchen cabinets and really look at what is in them. Go to where you keep your candles and count what is actually there. Look at your water, look at your warmth, look at your light. Not to panic, just to see clearly what you have and what you do not have. That is the first step. That is all I am asking. Because here is what I know from those 9 days in January. The people who had done even a modest amount of preparation, who had spent even a few hours thinking through the question before the outage arrived, those people were fine. They were uncomfortable at times, but they were fine. And the people who had done nothing were the people at my door on day 3. The gap between those 2 groups was not large. It was the difference between having thought about it and not having thought about it. I am asking you to think about it this week, before Friday. The second thing, and this is the one that costs nothing, and that he told me matters most, is to go know one neighbor you do not currently know. One. The family 3 doors down whose name you vaguely remember from a Christmas card. The elderly person on the corner you have waved to for 5 years without a conversation. 1. Find out their name. Find out something real about their situation. Let them know you are the kind of neighbor who shows up. Because when the time comes, and the time will come, you want to already be that person before the outage starts. not after. I know some of you watching this have felt something building for a long time. I know some of you have been looking at the news with a sense of dread that is not fully explained by any individual headline, but is somehow present beneath all of them. I know some of you have told someone what you were sensing and had them look at you like you were being dramatic. You are not being dramatic. That feeling is information. And the fact that you are here watching this, listening to a retired school teacher from Tennessee, that is not an accident. He told me this message had to reach the people who were ready to hear it. If something in what I said landed in a place inside you that feels like recognition rather than doubt, then this was meant for you. Subscribe to this channel if what I shared today reached you, not for my sake, because there are other accounts like mine, other people who came back carrying specific things, specific warnings, specific instructions, and I believe you are the kind of person who needs to hear them. And in the comments, I want to ask you something honest. I want to ask you, what is the one thing you have been putting off that you know you should do? Not in general, specific to what you heard today. The water, the food, the warmth, the neighbor you have been meaning to actually meet. Write it, not to report to me, because saying it out loud, putting it somewhere outside your own head, is sometimes the thing that makes it real enough to actually do. I came back for a reason. I believe saying this out loud is part of it. Whatever is coming, and something is coming, I pray this reaches you in time to do something with it. He told me what to store. I have told you. The rest is yours.